Hey y'all, welcome back to Agape Gardens. I'm Carolyn, and this video is documentation of our journey on the Three Rivers Every Bit Counts Challenge. I hope you enjoy. So we don't have enough space to grow enough sweet corn to provide for ourselves for the year, so we purchased a large bag. I think it's about 20 dozen ears of corn from a local farm, and we haven't canned it before, but this year we went ahead and tried to pressure can it, and we blanched and froze the rest. So anytime that you're canning, you want to make sure that your jars, your food, and your canner are around the same temperature. So I have hot jars that I've had in my pressure canner with just a little bit of water warming up. My corn has been boiling, so it's hot, and they'll be going into a hot canner. This is the way that you avoid getting any broken jars. I also soak my lids in warm water. This isn't required to simmer them or anything anymore, but I like to warm them up just so that I'm not putting a cold lid on a really hot jar and putting it in the pressure canner. So we're going to go ahead and load these into the pressure canner. The pressure for my area is 10 pounds of pressure, and you process pint jars for 55 minutes. So you want to be thoughtful about how much water you put into the canner, because it has to create enough steam to last for 55 minutes. You can also process quarts, but that takes 85 minutes. So as always, we let our canner vent for 10 minutes, put the weight on, and here you can see my husband going ahead and blanching the corn. In retrospect, we would probably blanch the corn on the cob and then cut it off the cob afterward. And he's just blanching this for a few minutes, putting it into an ice bath and then into freezer bags for the freezer. Here you can see my husband using his Vanna White skills, showing off the bag. Keller Farms is the farm that we get our corn from. We're really satisfied with it. Anytime we get any corn from the grocery store that isn't from Keller Farms, we are not satisfied. So we're super happy to put up some of this goodness. We don't eat a whole lot of corn, so this should be plenty for us. Here you can see I'm preparing to take off the herbs that we dried in the last video off of the dehydrator. I like to use a piece of parchment paper to kind of catch everything. It makes it easier to put it into the jar. And just a reminder, if you're drying herbs on the dehydrator, you're going to be taking them off the stems before or after they're dried. Some herbs are easier before and some are easier after. I'm so excited to have these dried herbs. Oregano is one that I use a lot when I make taco seasoning, and so having homegrown, home-dried herbs on the shelf is so amazing. They aren't especially expensive in the grocery store, but every little bit that you can save is, more that you have to put elsewhere. Hence the challenge, every bit counts. So every small bit that we can do to provide for ourselves is going to make us more sustainable in the future, which is what we're all about. Okay, so today's preservation project is all about cherry tomatoes. So I actually spent a lot of time at work today and I'm a little bit tired, but I'm still going to preserve something. The way things have been going this summer, we haven't been getting as many tomatoes because it's been so extremely hot, but in the last couple of weeks we've gotten some rain, things have cooled down, and my tomatoes are finally setting more fruit. So I'm hoping to be overrun with cherry tomatoes very soon, and so I'm going to make one of my favorites with the harvest that we brought in yesterday, and that is tomato confit. Super simple. I'm going to show you how to make it. Put some herbs, garlic, tomatoes, some good olive oil, some good flaky salt into your baking dish, and then you roast it at 400 degrees for a half an hour or so. And I like to use this in sauces. So when I make a pasta dish, I can use this, put in some cashew cream or some cashew cheese or some cream cheese or whatever it is in with this, with my pasta, and it makes a delicious, delicious sauce. Also with some red pepper flakes, a little bit of spicy sauce is delicious. So I don't can this. I put it in a quart jar, and you can leave it in the fridge for probably 3 weeks to a month. If you've got a good layer of oil on the top of it, then it would last a little bit longer. But I tend to go ahead and freeze this just to make sure it'll last and I can have that tomato pasta in December if I want to. So let's get to it. Just a side note, we grew all of this. You can too. Okay, so we've taken our tomato confit out of the oven. It's cooled a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of crush the tomatoes up and then go ahead and put them into our quart jar. And there we go. We've got a beautiful preserved tomato dish, and I probably could have fit that in a pint jar. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so we are on day 5 of the Every Bit Counts challenge, started by at 3 Rivers Homestead. And on day 5, I'm going to be making the balsamic onion jam. We harvested a whole bunch of onions that we started from seed this year for the first time. So it's the first time that I have a whole bunch of homegrown onions. Many of them are very small. So we're going to use these very small onions in this balsamic onion jam. Just because they're kind of a pain to peel, and why not just peel all the small onions at once and do something with them. So I'm actually going to double the recipe. It calls for 2 pounds of onions. I've got a little bit over 4 pounds here because we want 4 pounds once they are diced. So I have never made this before. I have seen it recommended on a couple of other YouTube channels, and I always wanted to try it, but I couldn't find an approved canning recipe for it until I got this book, which is the all-new Ball Book of Canning and Preserving, which I think was recommended on the Happy Homestead with Amanda. And so I got this, and what I want to say about this book is it has a lot of great recipes. This is the jam we're gonna make, and it does a really nice job of giving like hints and tricks and recipes on how to use the food that you've already preserved. So that's very exciting. And we're gonna get to chopping these onions. I'm gonna be using my Vidalia onion chopper. It is super handy. It just has a couple of different trays. One is larger. I'm going to be using the larger one. I don't know if you can see those lines. I'm going to be using the larger dice today so they have like substantial bits of onion in our onion balsamic jam. I'm also going to be using some store-bought balsamic. That sounds ridiculous. All balsamic is store-bought, but I have a really good quality balsamic that I get from a specialty shop that I use for dressings and on fresh food and stuff like that. And so this is one that you would just get at your local grocery store. It's a little bit, I think, a little bit more acidic. It's less sweet than the other one that I have, and I think this is probably what the recipe is intending, so that's what I'm going to use. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I always do is get my canner ready. I wash my jars, my lids, my rings. I just have these sitting in some warm water. And the water bath canner takes a long time to heat up. And I like to boil my jars to sanitize them. So that's what I get going first. And then I start working on my recipe. Now, my scale has a tendency to shut off midway through. So I'm just gonna weigh this bowl. And it is 5.4 ounces. So I know at the end I should have 4 pounds, 5.4 ounces. And that's when I know I have enough onions. Alright, I was not joking about peeling those small onions. Man, that took a long time. There was some residue and dirt on them, so I just went ahead and rinsed them and spun off the water in my salad spinner. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm using all different kinds of onions, whatever they were, and I'm just going to dice them up until I have 4 pounds. Alright, so my jars have been boiling for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and turn them off for right now. They'll stay nice and hot until we are ready for them. Alright, and so we are doubling the recipe, so I need to be mindful of that as I'm putting things in. It says to combine the first 6 ingredients in a stainless steel Dutch oven, and we're going to cook that for 15 minutes or until the onions become translucent. So the recipe calls for a half a cup of balsamic vinegar, so we're going to put in 1 cup. It says to add half a cup of maple syrup, so we're going to add 1 cup. One and a half teaspoons of salt. So I'm doubling that, so I'll just have 3 teaspoons of salt. Two teaspoons of ground white pepper. I don't have white pepper, so I'm going to be using black pepper, and 1 bay leaf. So we need 4 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, 4. See you back here in about 15 minutes. All right, so our onions are pretty well translucent, and we are going on to the next step. The next step is to add in 2 cups of apple juice. I have this organic apple juice. So since I'm doubling, I'm going to be adding 4 cups of apple juice. And then we're going to add some of the, calls for the low or no sugar needed pectin. The recipe calls for 3 tablespoons, so I'm putting in 6. We need to bring this to a rolling boil. Okay, so we're going to bring this to a rolling boil. Once it's at a rolling boil, we're going to add our sugar. The recipe calls for half a cup of sugar. So we're going to use 1 cup of sugar, and then we're going to boil it hard for 1 minute. And all that means is that we are going to let it boil where we can't stir away the boiling for 1 minute. Then we will remove it from the heat, take out our bay leaves, and put it in our jars. All right, I don't know if you can see with the steam, but it is at a rolling boil. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my sugar. And you wanna make sure you keep an eye on this. Okay, so we've stirred for 1 minute with it boiling, and now it is time to put it in jars, debubble, and get it in the canner. This onion jam turned out amazing. I had a little bit extra to put in the fridge, and it is delicious on any kind of burger, on a grilled cheese. Or I want to thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.